In the summer of 1923, a farmer named Stepan Kravchenko was working alone in a wheat field in the Kherson region of southern Ukraine. It was noon. The sun was directly overhead. His wife had told him to come inside during the midday hours. Everyone knew you did not work the fields at noon in summer. Stepan did not listen. His neighbors found him 3 hours later, standing in the middle of the field, still holding his scythe. He was alive. He was standing upright. But he was not responding. Not to his name, not to touch, not to anything. His eyes were open and completely empty, like someone had taken everything that was Stepan and simply removed it. He recovered partially over the following weeks. He could speak again, could eat, could perform simple tasks, but he never returned to the fields, and he could never explain what had happened in those 3 hours. He said only one thing, once, to his wife. In the middle of the night, when he thought she was asleep, he said she would not stop asking questions. Poludnitsa, from the Slavic word for midday, for noon, for the precise center of the day, is perhaps the strangest spirit in all of Slavic mythology. Not because of what she does, but because of when she does it. Every other spirit in the tradition operates in darkness, in forests, in water, at night, at the boundary between worlds. The Poludnitsa operates at noon, in full sunlight, in open fields, in the most exposed, most visible, most ordinary moment of the working day. There is nowhere to hide from her. There is no darkness to blame. She comes in the light, and that makes her more terrifying than anything that comes in the dark. She appears as a young woman, beautiful, always. The Slavic spirits that want something from you are always beautiful. Dressed in white, which in the midday sun becomes almost blinding. Her hair loose, her feet bare. She materializes at the edge of the field, or sometimes simply appears beside you with no approach you noticed, no sound of footsteps in the grain, and she begins to talk. This is her method, her weapon, her entire nature. She talks, she asks questions, endless questions, one after another, about anything and everything, about your work, your family, your village, your beliefs. She circles through topics without logic or pattern, jumping from the harvest to your childhood, to the nature of the sky. You must answer. If you stop answering, if you fall silent, if you try to walk away, if you attempt to change the subject, she becomes something else entirely. The questions stop, and what replaces them is worse than any question. The old accounts do not describe what she does when you stop answering. They only record that no one who stopped answering was found intact. But you also cannot answer forever. The sun moves, the noon hour passes, and if she has kept you talking until the hour is gone, if the sun has moved past its peak and you are still standing there, still answering, still caught in her endless questions, something happens to the person inside you. Something leaves. Something that does not come back. The old accounts describe this as madness, but that word is too simple. It was not chaos or violence or incoherence. It was emptiness. The people found after a full encounter with the Poludnitsa were quiet, compliant, functional in the most basic ways, but the particular thing that made them themselves, their humor, their opinions, their memories, their love for specific people, was gone, as if she had talked it out of them, question by question, answer by answer. She had drawn out everything that mattered and left only the shell, a person-shaped container with nothing particular inside. The body remained. The self did not. In ethnographic records from the late 19th century, collected across the wheat-growing regions of Ukraine and southern Russia, the Poludnitsa accounts share one detail that appears nowhere in published sources of the time, which means the villagers could not have read it and invented it themselves. Every person who encountered her and survived reported the same physical sensation at the moment she appeared. Not fear, not cold. Heat. A specific, focused heat, like standing too close to a fire, concentrated in the center of the chest, as if she was warming herself on something inside you before she began to take it apart with her questions. In 1897, a young woman named Oksana Lysenko encountered the Poludnitsa in a field near her village in the Poltava region. She was 17. She was working alone because her mother was ill and the harvest could not wait. She knew the stories. She knew you did not work at noon, but the harvest could not wait. She appeared without warning beside Oksana, simply there between one moment and the next, close enough to touch, smiling with the particular smile of someone who already knows how a conversation will end. She began with simple questions. What is your name? Where is your family? How long have you been working this field? Oksana answered. She kept her voice steady. She had remembered one thing her grandmother had told her. The only protection, the only possible escape. She had to keep answering until she heard the church bell from the village mark. The end of the noon hour. 1 hour. She had to survive 1 hour of questions. The questions became stranger as the minutes passed. What do you dream about? What do you regret? What do you want that you have never told anyone? What do you believe happens after death? Oksana answered everything. Not always honestly, not always completely, but she answered. She kept the conversation moving. She did not stop. She said later that the hardest moment was not the strange questions. It was when the Poludnitsa asked about her mother, about her illness, about whether Oksana believed she would recover. That question almost broke her, almost made her stop, because she did not know the answer, and not knowing made her want to be silent. She answered anyway. She said she did not know, but she hoped. One word, hoped, and the Poludnitsa tilted her head, as if that answer was the most interesting thing she had heard, and moved to the next question. And then the bell rang, one long tone from the village church, marking the end of the noon hour. The Poludnitsa stopped mid-sentence. She looked at Oksana for a long moment, with an expression that was not anger and not disappointment, but something more complex, something almost like respect. Then she turned and walked into the grain and was gone. The heat in Oksana's chest disappeared the moment she vanished. Oksana went home, sat down, and did not speak for the rest of the day. But the next morning she was herself, completely, entirely herself, with all her memories and humor and love for specific people intact. She had survived. She had kept answering. She told her grandmother what had happened, and her grandmother said, "Only go, girl, you kept talking. Why does she do this?" The old traditions offer an answer that is more melancholy than monstrous. The Poludnitsa was once a bride, a girl who died on her wedding day, or just before it, in the heat of summer. She had so much left to say, so many conversations unlived, so many questions about the life she would never have, and so she asks, forever. She finds people alone in the fields at the hottest hour of the hottest part of the year, and she asks them everything she never got to ask. She is not trying to destroy them. She's trying to have the conversations she never had. She simply does not understand that humans cannot survive an infinite conversation with something that is no longer living. The protections were specific. You did not work the fields alone between noon and 1 in the afternoon during summer. This was the simplest and most consistent rule across all regional traditions. The noon hour was hers. You rested. You ate. You stayed inside or in the shade of trees at the field's edge with others around you. If she appeared anyway, if you had been careless or unlucky or simply necessary in the field when the sun was highest, you answered every question without pause, without silence, without attempting to leave. You kept the conversation moving in any direction. You asked questions back if you could. Some accounts say this confused her, that she was not accustomed to being questioned. You counted quietly, internally. You tracked the movement of the sun. You knew when the noon hour had begun, and you knew it lasted approximately 60 minutes, and you kept yourself present and answering and alive for those 60 minutes, and then it was over and she had to leave. And if you felt the heat in your chest beginning that specific focused warmth, that meant she was near, before you had even seen her. You began talking immediately, to yourself, to the grain, to the sky. You filled the air with your voice before she could fill it with her questions. Some accounts say this worked, that she preferred to ask rather than interrupt. Stepan Kravchenko, the farmer found empty in his field in 1923, lived for another 40 years. He was functional. As mentioned, he could work, eat, sleep, perform the necessary tasks of a life. But his wife said that something essential was missing, that when she looked in his eyes she saw a room with the furniture removed. He never went back to the fields at noon. He never worked alone in summer, and on the hottest days, when the sun was directly overhead and the air was completely still and the wheat stood motionless in the heat, he would stop whatever he was doing and go inside and close the door and not come out until the church bell marked 1 o'clock. His grandchildren thought it was simply an old man's habit, a preference for shade. They did not know what had stood beside him in that field in 1923. They did not know what had talked him hollow over 3 summer hours. They did not know that the empty look in his eyes was not age or sadness, but absence, the specific absence of everything she had asked out of him, question by question, in the white heat of a Ukrainian noon. The fields are still there. The summers are still hot at noon, when the sun is directly overhead and the shadows disappear and the air stops moving if you are working alone, and you feel an unexpected warmth in the center of your chest. Start talking about anything, about everything. Do not stop. Do not be silent. And whatever she asks you, answer. Keep answering until the bell rings and she is gone, and pray that you still know who you are when it does.